Welcome, Educate U.S. listeners. Today on our show, Scott Drossos is here with us to talk about his role in higher education and connectivity. Scott currently serves as Boldyn's CEO of Higher Education. Scott, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Stacey. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, Scott, we like to ask people when they come on to tell us a little more about themselves. I noticed that you have a deep history, specifically with personalized learning and overall creative personalized learning solutions. I'm curious if you can share with us a little more about your journey beyond your LinkedIn profile.
Sure. Well, my journey has been in education and public sector at large, but education more specifically. And I guess I would describe my journey as kind of touching most of the bases of technology related aspects of education. So I've been involved in the learning management system side, the curriculum side, the testing side, the ERP and SIS side, or the administrative side. Even running schools at one point, and not on the higher ed side, but in school reform and managing schools in underserved communities around the United States. And so it's kind of, in some respects, logical that I ended up in, managed network services. And I was excited when I first got introduced to Apogee, which is who Boldyn acquired and became the Boldyn Higher Education Group. Uh, it was a business that had been around for over 20 years and had done amazing things, but was looking to, kind of go to the next level. So I've been here for 3.5 years. I have a couple daughters that are just outside of university now or college, and one's in cybersecurity and one's in staffing and recruiting, and they're both doing great off the payroll, which is nice. And yeah, so we're very fortunate. Consider myself and my family very fortunate.
Scott, with the world you've traveled in education, when we think about where we are currently, so I know I think about 2000 as being a critical year where at the onset of the internet, we're looking at schools starting to be wired for internet access, and we're now in a place now 25 years later, amazingly. What is your assessment of where you've seen the role of technology, where it's been most impactful? We're still having these conversations about the impact of COVID and where it's played a role in learning, but just your temperature of the landscape, really 25 years since we can really talk about like wired connectivity in schools. What would be your assessment of where we are?
Well, we got a long ways to go, but we've made a lot of progress. I can remember back when I first started my career and we deployed the world's first learning management system. Um, we didn't really understand the importance of infrastructure, the importance of connectivity. And so we kind of clunked along trying to implement change. And so we fast forward, 20 some odd years later, and there's become an increasingly high expectation from students and faculty and admin too, but students in particular, their lives, they've grown up their whole life with network connectivity. Folks like myself didn't, right? I predate that, where we expected networks to just be there. So there's a pervasiveness of access, and there's an expectation of reliability, and yeah, a student can do whatever they need. So that's where we're at today. And colleges and universities they're starting to shift. Like we work with a number of them around helping them move themselves. Let me start that over if that's okay. That last little part. So colleges and universities have historically looked at this as a kind of a nice to have, not really an amenity, or more like an amenity. And so what's really become apparent is that students come to a campus and they just expect it to work like it does everywhere else in their lives. And so colleges are increasingly trying to, kind of figure out how to meet that challenge. When we survey kids and students, and we deploy networks inside of residence halls, uh, we see that on average there's 3 to 4 devices, often 6 and 7 devices. We equip dormitories and residence halls with a capacity of 10 devices per student. Students expect their stuff to work. They expect to connect. and increasingly expect to connect outside their dormitory on their campus too. They want to be able to, kind of go across the whole campus and do whatever it is that they need to do and want to do. Um, they create an interesting set of challenges for university and colleges. They want to do their work typically between midnight and 6 a.m. So how do you staff for that? How do you, if there's a need for a student, they have a problem or a technical issue, where do they go for support? The colleges and they have not typically equipped themselves to provide support structures that match that kind of a profile. They've tended to think about it, hey, we deployed a network. If there's a support issue, we'll get to it 9 to 5. But if the student's in class or the student doesn't work at that point in time, as intensively, it doesn't really match the student's, profile. So the competition for students has grown as well over time, and so colleges have to. It's important that they're more ready and more sort of able to step up and meet the needs of the student, so that they view the student more like a customer, I think, than just someone who's there, has a privilege to be there to learn.
Yeah, thanks for walking us through that. And, I laughed a little when you said the 9 to 5 response. It's like, what students are operating on that 9 to 5? They're definitely up in the middle of the night doing some stuff, last minute assignments or whatnot, or even just connecting with friends, right? So that connectivity is really important. I thought it was really interesting. You mentioned infrastructure. And as we're entering, the AI world, so to speak, which I fully know AI has been around for a long time, but our new generative AI, right, that is here. And that's a whole piece too of, hey, what's the infrastructure that we need in schools to really be supporting that? I know also you speak about, and Boldyn speaks about smart campus and future-proofing higher education. Can you tell us a little bit about what does it mean to future-proof? What is a smart campus? And I wonder if you can just touch on the AI piece while you kind of walk us through that.
Sure. Well, AI certainly has a big role to play in the concept of a smart campus. Um, so when we think about smart campus, like these colleges and universities, a lot of them are like small cities, right? They're like smart cities. And so in the city of a university or college, you've got the life of a student, or the smart student, right? So what does a student do? They wake up in the morning, their their speaker goes off that's connected to the internet, and they, check their social media. They do whatever they do on their phone. And they move across the campus, whether it's to their class or to their, to their, where they get to eat, or whatever they may have to do that day. But everything they're doing is online. So whether they're in their residence hall, or whether they're strolling across campus, or whether they're going to a building for a class, they expect to be connected. They expect to have access to all the things associated with their academic life, but also all the things associated with their personal life. And they'll probably carry multiple devices, and they just expect that to work. So uh, it's important that the dormitory experience or the residence hall experience is great, but increasingly that's not enough for colleges to think about. And so the concept of a smart campus is just that everywhere you go, you have access. It's not an issue. And if you're walking home at night, maybe you're a young female student across the campus, you can't afford to, have dead spots across the campus where access doesn't work if there's an issue. I guess that doesn't matter whether you're, any person that would be vulnerable, I guess, would be a candidate or be concerned about that. If your college has a sports team and you want to go, watch the team, you want to be able to have an experience that allows you to upload and download, allows you access to your tickets, shows you where your seat is. Increasingly, sports stadiums are a big focus, the venues, we call them, that's how we refer to them. The venues are increasingly really tuned into the fan experience. So the student shifts from being a student to a fan. I guess they're one and the same, right? But on a campus, but the concept of a fan is important to think about from the university standpoint. So whether you're an administrator, or a faculty or a student, each of you has specific needs. and AI often increasingly powers those. So if you're a student and you're accessing some new application that leverages AI, it may be that you're actually, it's supporting you, or maybe that you're involved in academic studies around engineering and working with hypercomputing or supercomputing, kind of technologies that have high demands. The network has to support that kind of activity. So it really is just connectivity is the foundation of empowering the concept of a smart campus, a smart city, a smart student, smart faculty, smart administrator. And by the way, I see you're wearing a Philadelphia Eagles jersey. Now you're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Kansas City Chiefs, Kansas City Arrowhead Stadium is a client of ours. It's in our venue part of our business, but that a fan that would go to the Kansas City Chiefs stadium.
All right,
Um,
Scott, I'm going to have to cut you off. I'm sorry. Go
okay.
Birds.
Well, I'm not, so I'm not going to get into the fight about, the game, but the stadium experience for a Chiefs fan is, amazing. Everything they do and want to do and can do is handled through their phone. So whether it's their seat, whether they're, going to the concession or whether they're going to go buy something from the store. And increasingly, that's the same kind of experience that colleges want to have for their students, or their, alumni or whoever's attending an event, but also the students and faculty who are moving across the campus. So the idea that you are truly mobile and always available and accessible to whatever it is you need. At the end of the day, that is sort of the foundation of a smart campus.
To that end, when we think about accessibility, something obvious that comes up too is security. So, in your experience and where we currently are, obviously we've talked a lot about cyber threats on the political scale, on a national security scale, but as it relates to higher education and just the experience for students, what is your assessment of where we currently are about the way we protect students online, and what, as you mentioned at the start, we have a lot more to go, or we have a lot more we can do. Take that stance as it relates to cybersecurity, and where do you hope it becomes in the next few years or coming up?
Well, cybersecurity is something that we're going to have to invest in for a long time. It's going to need to be seen as an operational, continued operational competency and investment. From our standpoint, we look at the network as, again, a foundational element that has to be secure. There's so many layers of security now that organizations, colleges and others, enterprises outside of colleges have to consider. And there's all these layers of security that you have to be effective and efficient in. And there's aspects of compliance that we have to meet. We're increasingly asked to make sure that all of our operations behind the scenes are meeting certain cybersecurity standards. So we stay on top of that. The technology itself, of running and managing the network, all aspects of that are made to be completely defensible and take on whatever vulnerability, try to eliminate whatever vulnerabilities may be out there. It is an area for colleges that there's increasing. How do I put it? It wasn't an area historically that they spent a lot of time worrying about. Maybe they focus a little more on physical security than cybersecurity, and now they're having to, kind of step up on both fronts.
You walked us through so nicely the importance, right, of why thinking around a smart campus and access and the student experience is going to be important. And, it's something that people are coming to, expect, really, right? Like sort of this ease. Like as you were talking about that, I was also thinking about my experience going to see a Broadway show. And from my seat, right, with my kids, I can order some concessions so that I don't need, to try to rush them out at intermission and rush us back in, and try to keep everyone together. So yeah, there's like this expectation. And so, how we can see that, I love how you said smart cities, smart universities. And so, now I'm going to ask you to look into the future and the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. What do you think the emerging technologies or trends will be? And what impact will they have in higher education?
Well, that's a great question. I think, so I made my personal, one of my personal sort of commitment or habit for 2025 is to, embrace AI even more so. So I try to think about, everything I do, which ways can AI help it? I think that the concept of personalized learning for students will go to another level. Um, the app, also the concept of high performance connectivity or access will um, just become a non-negotiable. So we'll see that as um, an important standard that's met. I think that as far as colleges, as they think about how they redefine their their relevance and continue to keep their academic offerings fresh and their research fresh, it's going to create different opportunities than than they've had to think of or than they've designed their institutions to serve. And those that can step up and take advantage, embrace things like AI and embrace the kind of the technology trend, are gonna, I think, have tremendous opportunity to grow. And those that don't are gonna feel, more pressure. Students, they talk amongst each other. Social media is such a prevalent thing now. It can be your best advocate and allow you the best way, create the best mechanism for you to attract other students. And they can also become your worst critic, And so I think aligning students aligning their student experience combined with their work readiness, whatever that is for a student, is going to be the most important thing that happens over the next 5 years in terms of how colleges evolve and take advantage of AI and adjusting themselves to the future.
Scott, I'm glad you just touched on the student experience. From your work, and you gave us a great example of what the smart campus is. From conversations with students and what you've been sensing in the field, what do students primarily want as it relates to accessibility? Is it about just the comfortable streamlininess, if that's a word, of accessing their um, coursework, information about the university, reaching out for tutoring services, but or is it something else that students are just are thrive or wanting to see or wanting to experience, especially those who've moved away from home and may well be out on their own for the first time. But what's been your experience in conversations or what you've heard from others as it relates to the student experience?
Well, so when I say student experience, I'm sort of intentionally separating the academic experience from that. And traditionally that was, and by the way, that's still a really important part of the experience, right? But the importance of the student experience has been elevated because the student um, expects to have um, access to all of the things that they're used to having. And if the college isn't equipped or able to and allow that to occur, it really impacts the student's experience from their own expectation standpoint, right? So it's really understanding what do the students need and want. Students increasingly they'll have a Peloton in their room, their dorm room. They'll they do a lot of streaming, as you all know, whether it's music or video. There's a lot of gamers. Gamers have they have they're some of the most demanding network users. They want like no latency, when they're on playing a game, in their room or wherever they are, but typically it's in their room. And so um, they look at that 4 year experience on campus, and the friends they meet and the things they do and the way that they're kind of able to build their own brands too. That's an increasingly important part of it. Um, and so all of that has to happen and is supported through technology. So it's just blended into their sort of daily lives and how they think about who they are and what they want to do. And of course, they're going to go to their courses or take their classes. But increasingly they're going to be innovative in terms of the ways they do that. They can use tools to capture notes differently. They can use tools to, um, help refine some of their inputs. They can get access to information. The idea of memorizing stuff is not that relevant anymore, right? It's actually um, you're more valuable in today's economy if you know how to use the tools and leverage them to become highly efficient and productive than you are about like the content that you've memorized, right? So that's a set of skills that they're actually acquiring and refining when they go there. They often come to the college already with some of those skills, obviously, but the application of them in the context of whatever it is they're studying and however they're functioning with their new relationships becomes the stepping stone for what they're going to do after they leave college. And so all of that has to be powered by this sort of ubiquitous environment that everybody expects to be there. And so I'll just say, if it's not there, you can appreciate a student that thinks like I'm describing. It's incredibly disappointing to them or frustrating to them. I was on a plane the other day, last week, and I was flying, and I paid a fair amount of money for my ticket, and I just expect to be able to get on Wi-Fi. And the airline that I was on, they were notorious historically for not having great Wi-Fi, and I should have remembered that, and I booked. And so I'm on this plane for 4 hours, and I couldn't work. And I thought, here's an airline that thinks that their job is to get me from point A to point B, which is true, right? That's obviously part of it, and to get me there safely. But my expectation is that while I'm in the air and I'm flying, I'm also going to be able to be productive and work. And so I just felt like this particular airline didn't understand their customer, or certainly wasn't as committed to it. Because they had Wi-Fi, they checked the box that they had Wi-Fi. It just didn't work. And everybody around me, who was trying to get on had the same issues. It wasn't just me. And I think increasingly, that's a metaphor for colleges. They can't just say, yeah, we've got, Wi-Fi in our dorms. If they get there and the students, have a terrible experience, or they can only access, a device, or that certain hours there's bottlenecks and things like that. Um, that's table stakes now for colleges. And the ones who have recognized that they don't need to be great network providers. They can lean on someone, external, partners to do that, and they can double down more on their academic relevance, research if they're a research institution, and the student experience. That's where we're seeing the most innovative leading, colleges put their efforts, and then letting experts like ourselves come in and help take care of this part of their operation, so they can be world class in this area, while they focus on being world class in kind of what they want to be best at.
I feel like there's a lot of advice you just gave and potential call to action for higher education. So just to like bring the point home, if a higher education institution asked you, how can I be most relevant over the next 5 to 10 years, what would you say to them?
I would say focus on your customer, your student, right? Make sure that whatever it is that attracts them to come to your institution, be as good as you can at that in that area. If you're a research institute, obviously continue to be innovative and leading edge as you can in research, and increasingly try to avoid the distractions of trying to do things that aren't core to to those priorities. And secondarily, try and set the bar for things that impact student experience. Because again, I said they're your customer. Try and make sure they're delighted that they have a great experience and that they think when they talk to their friends and family that this is a great institute to go to, and they would like, because there's decades and some cases centuries of alumni following each other into institutions. So there's a new bar that's being set. The game has kind of changed a little bit because of it, and so I think that's what the institutions are grappling with, and the ones that are leading edge or recognize it, and they're already kind of off and working a little bit differently.
Scott, we've been talking a lot about the future. We've talked of projecting out 5 to 10 years and really painting a picture of what could be. At the same time, though, we think about what is in the way. I guess that's one way of putting it in terms of obstacles and challenges that we're currently facing in your work, and just sort of where you've seen trends and everything going. What are pitfalls and things that people are either experiencing or perhaps not taking into consideration when they're making decisions about considering developing a smart campus, embracing that model LMS and that universe?
Great question, Nick. Well, driving change around networks in particular, connectivity, there's sort of five things that we seem to encounter in colleges. One is the devices. I talked about how many devices students have and the fact that we try and build to support 10. But most colleges, or a lot of colleges, haven't anticipated that pervasive usage as exists today and in student expectations. Another big one is the financial model. Now, traditionally, what's happened is, colleges have capitalized a budget, for 5 to 7 years usage. And so it's a big dollar item. It's millions of dollars to go, build a new network. And then they leave it alone and they do it again in 5 to 7 years. The challenge with that is that the student needs are changing. The AI is hitting us. There may be something breaks and it takes a while to get it fixed. There's just a constant need for the ongoing sort of change to the environment. And if analogy I would use, if you had to go buy your electricity for 5 to 7 years and someone asked you to write a multi-million-dollar check for it, you'd go, oh, I don't want to do that. That's really hard to predict what my needs are going to be. It's hard to imagine why I would have to come up with that kind of money all at once. And so increasingly, what we see is moving to an operational, what we call an OpEx model. So it's just a monthly amount to kind of provide all of that technology and all the service and all the support. We see that kind of model increasing in relevance and attraction because of the constantly changing and evolving needs and the high demands of students and meeting those expectations. The other thing that's wrapped around that some colleges sort of wrestle with is change management, right? So if you've done it a certain way, if folks have been involved in deploying and managing and supporting that can be that can cause some slowness in terms of how they address the new requirements and the new ideas of moving to an OpEx model versus a CapEx model. So I think those are important considerations that we usually encounter almost every time we work with the college for the first time. That's trying to move from an old system that's due to be replaced, and it's the moment when they have that opportunity to rethink whether they should move to an OpEx kind of relationship. And the reality is, if they don't, so if they do another capital investment, that kind of puts them on the hook for another 5 to 7 years of not really being able to be nimble like they could otherwise. So we see more of it. We're excited about the opportunity to help finance all of that and to help colleges move to a model that's easier to manage in a perpetual basis.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. And so we always like to ask our guests to share where people can potentially connect with you or follow you. I know you do a lot of writing. So where can people access those things and connect with you further?
Sure. So if you wanted to reach me publicly, I tend to do most of that on LinkedIn. So you can access me on LinkedIn through my name. If you want to access me directly, I'm scott.drossos@boldyn.com. And those are probably the two most, the best ways to get me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on our show. We appreciate you, and have a good rest of your night.
Thank you, Chef Stacy, and thank you, Nicholas. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.